job interview is one of the most anxiety-provoking situations most people can find themselves in, even when they go to plan. But what happens when you have your worst interview ever? Our guests share their worst interviews ever in the hope that you will take something from their mistakes to have a more successful interview outcome. Some of the stories are horrific and some are just downright embarrassing. Let's join our host, Kevin O'Reilly, the interview skills coach with over 25 years' experience in the fields of coaching and recruitment. Let's welcome our guests to the show.
Welcome, everybody, to my worst interview ever. We have a special guest on with us today, Tiago Moreira. He is the owner of We Care, but to get to where he is now, the owner of We Care, he has had to go through some worst interviews. He's going to share those with us today, and I'm really looking forward to this. So, Tiago, how are you today?
I'm okay, thank you, Kevin. How are you?
I am very well. Where does that name Tiago come from?
Well, it comes definitely from Latin, but I think it comes from Iago. I think I've looked at it many years ago. Like teenager, probably curious about where it came from. But it's a typical Portuguese name. You'll find it in Brazil, Italy. So it has the roots will be somewhere around that area.
Cool.
But I like it.
Yeah, it's the first time I've ever heard it or seen it, and it just seems to roll off the tongue.
It does, but do you know what it translates into in English?
What's that?
James.
Oh,
I'd rather have Tiago than James.
I like Tiago better, I think. Yeah.
So do I.
Okay. So James, sorry, I mean Tiago. What we're going to do here is we're going to share our experiences today with the listeners, and I want you to just introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, tell us what you do, and tell us a little bit about your journey to get to where you are now.
Yeah. So my name is Tiago. I'm a registered nurse. As Kevin said, I'm the owner and founder of We Care, together with my wife, who's also a nurse. And so pretty much over the last nearly 4 years, I've been working and progressing my career. So there's a whole lot of experience there. And throughout the years, and there's been a number of roles, different roles, from nurse, just a band 5 nurse, and then going up to it would be similar to the band 6s and band 7s, and then regional roles. And there were quite a hoops to go through along during all these years. Obviously, I'm Portuguese, so we came to the UK in 2012, and in terms of the management side of my career, that's where we progressed further. It's just a different way of looking at healthcare, and it took some time to adjust, but there are good opportunities, and I do like to think that there is some merit as well in terms of working hard, and not going in sick, no absence, and just commit to the role and try to do your best every day, and that allowed for the opportunities to come up. I tried to hold on to as many opportunities as I could. Obviously, not all of them were successful, but I think that's kind of expected. You're not always going to succeed. You're going to have fails, but I think that the important is that just because you didn't achieve something, you don't just give up. You pick yourself up and you push and you work towards your next opportunity, and then you try and hold on to that. And yeah, that's what led us to where I am today. So we have our own business who's starting. It's been a long project. This has. We're starting trading now, but it's looking good, which is what we want to. So as a nursing agency, obviously there's a lot of work, there's a lot of competition as well, and I think every company in any sector will have their own way being themselves. We have our own way. We like to focus on people. That's why our motto is because you matter. Because really, that's I think it goes back to an interview that I had many years ago when I was asked, um, to name three important things um, as a manager. It was for a management role and the answer was pretty simple. It's the staff, the patients, and the relatives, because it's the people that matter in my sector, in my industry, which is in healthcare. Um, that's where kind of everything stemmed from.
Yeah, and that's a great segue into actually why we're here today to discuss some of those interviews, and that is an absolutely beautiful answer that you've given. You know, the people, especially
Yeah,
in your line of work, it is all about the people. It's about the
yeah,
people you look after and the extended family and the people that you work with,
yeah,
because it's all a challenge. It's a huge challenge, and for you to want to continue that and even more so start up your own business. And I know you personally, and I know that you've had some struggles trying to get to this stage, and it has been quite a project getting to this stage, but you never faltered, you never wavered. There may have been moments where you maybe had to take a knee and take a breath and think, what am I going to do next? But you continued and you just continued, and now you're a business owner, a director, and you have your own company. And I think
yeah. That's
that's
it.
absolutely fabulous. Now, what I would love is for you to share a couple of those interviews that you maybe have had on your way through and up to where you are now,
Yeah,
because as we all know, interviews can be nerve-wracking at best and horrendous at worst. So
yeah.
do you have any sort of really, really bad examples where you've turned up as an interviewee or a candidate and had the worst interview ever?
Yeah, I mean, I've had, I've had. There was a time years ago where there was an advert for this is prior to actually coming to Northern Ireland, and I was looking for a different job in just a different part of the country, and there was an advert for at the time that interview was for a nurse, and I got there, and I tried to prepare as I always try to prepare for the interviews. I think it's important that you know your thing. Um, but as the interview started, the questions were really, really strange. And when I started to halfway through the interview, no, probably 20 minutes into the interview, I actually asked, what is the job? Because they were looking for a nurse, but it wasn't to work as a nurse. It was in a call center. And they were talking about the question was just strange because they were just asking questions about uh, the availabilities and the experience with marketing and I was like, what is what is the job? And they said they wanted a nurse, someone with experience in nursing, but that wasn't actually the interview. That wasn't actually the job. So we just stopped it there. But there was some nervous. I remember when I went for my first manager interview. I was already recruited for a manager role. So I was interviewed by a Northern Irish company back in Portugal, and it was a big challenge for me. I already have many years experience as a nurse, but the interview was in English, which was a different language to my own language.
Mhm.
It was from a different country altogether. I wasn't sure how things really, worked in Northern Ireland, and it was a little bit nerve-wracking because things were so different in terms of the expectations, the what each country will have their own health vision, and we were being asked to write care plans, which wasn't a problem. I could write care plans, but in Portugal, for example, when you're working in a care home is completely different than what it is in the UK altogether. And we don't have care plans in the care homes, so it's those type of questions that you're being a little bit caught off guard because it's not what you do on your day-to-day basis. And another thing that was kind of I really have to be conscious about my answers was the fact that I worked as a nurse. I all my career as a nurse was one thing. The roles that I was interviewing for was a manager,
Hmm.
and it was a manager in a nursing setting. But the answers that I had to give were not from the perspective of a nurse. They had to be because they're not looking for a nurse; they're looking for a manager. So you kind of have to. It's difficult where you have to change the chip. Kind of, you
Hmm.
need to go from I'm not. I can't answer as a nurse. I need to answer as the manager, and it's a mental workout when you're starting to answer. Someone will ask in terms of infection control, and I would give them, as a nurse, I do this, 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 but that's not the whole answer. That's great that you know that if you're working as a manager, your staff, your team needs to do those things. But what else are you doing from the manager's point of view? And as I was answering, I was realizing that hold on, because this is not it's not the nurse interview. So sometimes, and that was the time that was my first interview for a managerial role in here in Northern Ireland, and it was trying to get yourself in that mindset that the job is different. So you might know all the technical stuff, and that is great, but that's not what you're going to be doing. You're going to be making sure that people do the, your team does applies that knowledge in those procedures and those policies. So it was nerve-wracking. By the end of it, I wasn't. If you would ask me how did it go, it was it was tough. I have no idea if I did well, if I did poorly, or I went. Uh, and that was tough. That was a hard interview, and it happened again even when I had my first interview for a regional role, because there was a lot of focus on finance and the business development of it. And obviously, from my previous role in management, I had some knowledge of that, but I still had to prepare because it was even further from what was my background, which is nursing.
Hmm.
It was more about the business itself, and it was important that you prepare and you try and come up. And internet is great these days because you can try and go and you know you can ask interview temple for interview for a manager role. Then you read those questions and then you try and prepare yourself for it. But on the day when you're there facing the person, it's a different
Yes,
thing
it's
altogether.
it's it's a very different story, isn't it? It's it's
Oh
it's
yeah.
you, absolutely. There is so much information out there at the moment around interviews and how you can prepare for an interview. You could absolutely get overwhelmed just with the
Yeah.
volume alone, and it's knowing that, am I preparing in the right way?
Yeah.
Because there is so much variety that you could be preparing in a completely different direction. And I love what you had said actually about the difference between thinking like a manager when going for a manager's role and thinking like a nurse, and how you had to change that up completely. And with regards to my clients, that is something that happens quite often. They are very, very technical, skillful, experienced people, but it's thinking like that next level. It's thinking like that executive, thinking like that manager, thinking like that director or business owner. It is getting into that mindset before they walk in that door. And it's the preparation. And it's hard to look at yourself in the mirror and think, yeah, I'm in that mindset. I'm in that space. You almost need somebody else to go, well, actually, you're going down the wrong path. Potentially you maybe need to go up this other direction. And that's why the sort of reflective practice is really important with regards to interviewing. But it's funny how you touched on again the language barrier. You coming across
Mhm.
from Portugal, and your first interview was pure English, and you you just you just couldn't marry it all together. Plus, how different
Yeah.
everything was from your country in compared to the UK. That
Yeah.
that sounds like a horrendous
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, it was a big challenge. I mean, I like to think that back then, 12 years ago, I thought that I had a good level of English in terms of, the vein of the language and all of that. I'll be honest, you only have that idea until you actually go and live somewhere else.
Well, that's it,
Because
isn't it?
yes, because when I got, when I arrived to Northern Ireland, I was like, oh, I don't know what these people are saying. And it took a little bit of adjustment and really, but I was lucky. I found a lot of people that were willing to have the patience and the
Mm.
time, and if needed to repeat things, if I asked them to repeat and not take offense in that, and that helped a lot in terms of settling in and learning and progressing. Um, but when you're going to an interview, that I think it is important that you need to you need to keep yourself open to the fact that there might be, and you don't necessarily need to be from a different country. Sometimes different regions will have different expressions for the same thing,
Mm.
and sometimes you're saying something in a way that makes sense. If you live in, I don't know, if you live in Belfast, you might have an expression that makes sense to someone from Belfast listening to you, but if you go to Larne, they might perceive it differently.
Yeah.
So I think that when you're as an interviewee, when you're answering the questions, when you're expressing yourself, I think you should also try and be mindful of what you are, how you are saying things, or what you are saying, the expressions you use,
Yeah.
because that might play a role in terms of how you come across
It
to the
does.
other person.
Absolutely. It definitely does. And I think it's called colloquialism, where it's specific to different regions and you use different terms or different terminologies for similar words or
Same thing.
phrases. Exactly. And you have to be very mindful and very aware of that. And an interview isn't just about the information that you can gather together so that you can tell it. You have to ensure that it's the right information and that it's going to land well with your audience. And
Yeah,
a lot of what we would do in sessions is trying to understand those people who you're going to be sitting in front of. What are their likes and dislikes, and that isn't always possible because most interviews you don't know who's going to be sitting in front of you until you walk up on that day, and even then you'll just know them by name. But quite a lot of interviews now will give you the interviewers, and you can do a little bit of research on them. You can go onto LinkedIn, you can go onto Facebook, you can even go onto their company website and just do a little bit of research,
yeah,
because it is always better to understand the people that you're going to be speaking with and create that little bit of a rapport so that you can actually build a little bit of a rapport quicker if you're talking almost the same language. And it's great, that you had mentioned about the difference in the language and the colloquialisms. And it's just, I've seen it. I've seen it just exactly as you have explained it. If I've interviewed people in Belfast and then interviewed people in Larne, they are using different wording for the same phrase or the same meaning.
yeah,
And it takes me a moment to adjust to what they're saying. But if this
yeah,
was a high powered job or a high level job, the onus would be on the candidate to be clear, crystal clear, so that
yeah.
the interviewers did not have to think, they just had to tick the box.
Yeah, I agree. I think that as an interviewee, you need to try and convey your knowledge, your experience, your information. The it's like selling something.
Hmm.
Whatever way you can make it as easy as possible for someone to buy, that's the way to go around it. Whatever way you can, express yourself and show your knowledge and your skills and all of that in a way that it's easier understood by everyone, by your interviewer, then the easier it is because they get a clear message of you. They get a clear message of what you know, what you are about, and it puts you in a better position if they are having to guess, you know, not quite sure, if
Mm.
can they. So someone has an expression there from Larm. They're going to be dealing with someone from Neri. Are they going to make themselves understood? You know,
Yeah.
Are they going to be able to communicate effectively or not? And I think that if you show that actually, I do think it's important to do research on the company you're applying for.
Mhm.
And all companies nowadays on their websites will have like team or who we are or a section like that. And I think it's important that you have, even if you don't dig deep into it, but I think it's important to know who this person, because when you go into a room and you have three people sitting across the table asking you questions, you'll know them by name. But I think it's different. Even the fact that you know that what each person role is within the company prepares you better to how
Yeah.
you address them. If you think that it's someone that is in a director's position, you probably will be more thoughtful about how you talk, the language you use,
Mm.
how your body language, your posture, all of those things will, at least I like to think that those
Well,
things happen.
yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and it is going to that level of detail that makes the big difference. And I know they're only small, little incremental differences, but stacked together, they make a huge difference.
Yeah.
And it is really, really important. And you're right, the body language, even how you come across, is it a firm handshake? Is it a less than firm handshake? Is it a wait to be asked to be seated? Do you walk into the room with your head hung down and sort of that unconfident, hunched over, or do you walk in and try to take up as much space as you can and show a little bit of confidence, a little bit of
Hmm.
pride in who you are and in yourself and in your experience and skills?
Yeah. And I think that sometimes even, if you place yourself in the position of the interviewer,
Mm.
you're applying for a role, doesn't matter your role. I think it's a good exercise as well, at least for me. I used to that in terms of trying to think about what type of person are they expecting to see here.
Yeah.
If you're applying for a role of a managerial role, do they want someone that is shy, that comes in, as you said, head hung, not confident, not fearful, but just not showing any confidence? Or would you prefer, as that owner, as that director, to have someone recruiting someone that is actually confident, not cocky, but that you can carry yourself,
Yeah.
and you walk in and you know your place, because you can be confident and still know your place.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, that knowing those people and thinking about all these aspects of the role that you're applying for, I think that they all have an impact, one way or the other, across the interview, just to the other side of the table,
I
and
think
all of those will matter.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that level of preparation is so important because what I tend to find is a lot of clients have that fear of the unknown, of walking into a complete new place, potentially not knowing the people, definitely not knowing the expected questions, not knowing how they should reply. There's so much that is unknown within an interview. But if you can get in and do your research, that removes a lot of that anxiety around that unknown aspect. So
Mhm.
you're actually creating that almost path for you to reduce your nerves.
Yeah.
There's little steps you can take to help reduce the nerves. And one of them is obviously researching the company because it helps you remove that anxiety around that unknown. Another is giving a phone call to the HR department or the recruitment department and asking how many people's on the panel, what type of room is it in, is it on a first floor or ground floor. If that information isn't relatively available, you can you can literally ring the HR department to find out as much as you need. And sometimes you can even ring and ask, could I have the names of the interviewers, and you could do a little bit of research on those as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's always better to walk into a room where the only thing that you don't know are the questions.
Hmm.
Everything else, at least you have an idea. So from an anxiety point of view, as you were saying, it's a lot easier to walk into a room where I know that face, I know what that person
Mm-hmm.
job is. I'm confident about the premises. I brought everything that I need in terms of documentation, if any, is requested, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
with me. I've prepared. I know what the company is about. I know what their mission is. You know, I think I have a good idea of what the job is. So
Yeah.
bring it on.
Yeah, and I think potentially just going back to your one of your interview times where you said that you didn't know what they were going to say, what they were going to do, and when you walked in, it was actually a marketing job that they wanted
Yeah,
a nurse for.
that
Yeah,
was
yeah,
just
that's very
surreal.
difficult. That's very difficult to prepare for because I actually don't think they knew what they were really looking for when they had put that advert out. And I tend to see this more and more often is the job descriptions are not exactly what it is they're looking for.
The job descriptions, I think nowadays, sometimes they're just uh, it's not going to be a copy paste, but it's just a very very high level
Mm,
of a couple of the main tasks that you expected to, or very generic things like you're going to be in charge. But being in charge, what exactly are you going to be in charge of? You know, it's like I'm going to be in charge of my own medication as a nurse and
yeah.
my documentation. And will I have my own allocated patients? I'm going to be in charge of the unit, which means that I'm going to have to be in charge of the rest of the team that works there.
Hmm.
I'm going to be in charge of the whole place. What, you know, so I understand that from an employer point of view, sometimes that gives you a broader scope in terms of once you have the person in, you can try and tailor things
Yeah.
around for the interviewee for me applying to a job. It can create some gray areas there where it's just more uncertainty. But it's another thing that you can sometimes ring, as you were saying, and ask what's exactly the role for,
Yeah.
or even at the interview. But you can ask. I I wouldn't take offense, and someone would ask me, just to confirm that the role is for
Yeah.
this. I think people would appreciate it to save them time if you were not, actually it's not. I thought it was a different thing altogether,
Yeah.
and it might open a door for a different interview.
Well,
You
that's
never
it.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. That's it. And I think that it's that clarity, that level of clarity that candidates do need. And unfortunately, I see it more and more often now that I know you said it's not copy and paste, but in a lot of organizations, it's copy and paste. Is they go onto the internet, look for a particular job role that they think is needed, and then they copy and paste it from there, and then that's it.
Yeah,
But they don't actually take the time to speak to someone who has potentially been in that role or speak to their manager and find out exactly what it is they need to do that
mhm,
role. So what skills
yeah,
do they need? What experience do they need? And I know at this moment in time, there's this degree deficit where companies, chip shops, are now asking for people with food hygiene degrees to work as a counter attendant in a chip shop. And I just think that is mad,
yeah,
absolutely mad, because they're going to find that very difficult. And then the next thing what you hear from businesses and organizations is there's nobody out there that can do the job.
yeah,
It's because of those job descriptions, they're not really enticing people in.
yeah,
And again, if you
yeah.
look at most job descriptions, you'll find that the employers put everything they want, but nothing that you're going to receive as a candidate.
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, it would be you, you don't need going to the chippy example. If someone, if someone doesn't have, someone might not have training for food hygiene, which is fair enough. Not everyone does that. If you never worked in the food industry or health industry, hospitality, chances are you won't have it. But that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that you know, you're going to be bad. Perhaps, as the employer, if you don't have, this is desirable. But if you don't have, we will offer the training. And that might
Yeah.
entice people or say that, what, I don't have it, but they say that they'll give it, I'll give it a go.
Absolutely. And I think that's almost like a little added bonus. Not only are you coming in and you're going to receive a job, but you're also going to be upskilled while you're in that job.
Yeah,
And I think that's part of telling potential employees what they will receive, as opposed to just telling them what you want them to have.
Yeah.
Because it's very difficult to have everything that every organization wants.
Yeah.
And it's more difficult working out exactly what they mean by certain terms and phrases. And that's why a lot of people give up on it. They'll look down that and they'll go, well, I don't have this, and I don't have this, and I don't have this. And they go, can't apply.
Yeah.
And that is not the case, you know, and a lot of what that is potentially should be put under the desirable criteria and not the essential criteria.
Yeah. Because you might need the person working at the shippy to have food hygiene training.
Mhm.
That is fine. But that doesn't mean that they need to have it at contract signing time. That means that they need to be willing to receive the training, which is a different thing altogether. No, if I'm not willing to get training for, then yeah, you're not the right person. We need everyone working in here to have this specific skill. We are prepared to give you the skill, but if you're not willing to learn it, then then it's definitely not the right job for you.
Yeah. I think there should be a question in there somewhere always about learning. Like, are you willing and capable of learning? Because for me, a really good employee is someone that wants to learn. It's not
Yeah,
someone who's afraid of making the mistake, but someone that wants to learn. And it also
yeah,
shows what type of employer it is if they are willing to allow you to learn on the job.
yeah. And I've done, after all these years, I've done many interviews as an interviewer, and a lot of times you get templates from the company with the
Yeah.
interviews. And what I've noticed over the last 10 years that there used to be a question about, are you willing to take on training for for your skills? For that question, you go through templates nowadays, that question is gone. I see a lot of interviews where it's ticking box for
Mm.
regulatory purposes. We've asked the infection control, the safeguarding, the falls. We've asked those questions. You're not really learning anything about the applicant in one way, because they might know all of that, but they're not really good employees. Then you have applicants that, I'd really like to go into care, but I've never had any employment in the care sector.
Yeah.
So when you ask me what's the procedure if you find someone lying on the floor, they don't know.
Yeah.
They never had that training. They never had that experience. They never had that job where someone would show them. You, that's just not. They're going to give you. They're going to try and give you the best answer possible for them.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure it's not going to tick. It's not going to get 5 out of 5 marks for that answer, because it's not possible.
Yeah.
They don't know the documentation that it's required. This is a specific. I know that this is a specific example of an interview, but I go around and I see, and and I think it happens often. It doesn't make it easier for new. I had a lady applying to a job once, and at the end of the interview, she was getting crossed at me, and I hadn't even said anything, because she was like, "Oh, I've never done this, and and I already know I'm going to fail the interview. But if no one gives me the chance first, how am I going to ever get it?" I gave her the job, and she's actually good at it. But I think that's the thing: the preparation, the interviews, the job descriptions, all of those end up being conditions to what the employers actually are able to receive from an applicant, and what the employees, candidates, are able to get as a new starters. If you think that with very specific questions like this, and I'm not talking obviously if it's going to be a higher hierarchy job, you need, if you're getting someone for finance department, yeah, they need to have finance knowledge. But sometimes when it's, not qualified skills or trainings, but it's still skilled job, there's trainings that need to be undertaken, there's techniques and all of that. By not, by just closing the door like that on such specific questions for someone that has never done the job, you end up by getting the people that, well, I don't like you as an employee, you're not a good person to have on my team, you're dismissed. They're the ones that have all the training. They'll be able to answer all the tick box
Yeah.
questions. they'll get the job, but those companies are not getting perhaps the best candidate. There's people out there that they don't have those skills. They're
Yeah.
willing to. And I think that sometimes if you just close the door like that, then it's very hard for someone to get into a job. That's why I think that it's important then as an interviewee, you prepare and you're honest. I think you need to be honest and you need to be
Mhm.
upfront and you say that on my CV you'll notice that I've never done this job, but I am willing. I really want this, and I'm willing, to learn. I'm willing
Yeah.
to attend your trainings. I'm willing to, you tell me what it is that you want done or how you want it done. I'll learn it and I'll be a good asset for your team.
Yeah.
And I think that as an interviewee, you need to be, the more you prepare for it, you're comfortable, you're confident saying this a new employer.
Mhm.
I think it's my opinion about that. I'd rather have someone, if I see someone that has been, five different employers for the same role in the last 5 years, something's not right here.
Yeah.
And they might tick all the boxes, they might answer all the questions, procedure, everything's there. Then you have someone who never did it. In their interview, it's not too bad. They didn't know that they need to do an accident form for the fall, but they're probably not aware that there is such a thing as an accident form.
Yeah.
Even though they're scoring less on the question, that I think that doesn't necessarily make them the worst
Yeah.
applicant. And I think that as an interviewee, it's important that you can portray yourself as, I don't have that experience, but I
Yeah.
want to learn.
Yeah.
I want to
Absolutely.
do it.
And I think you're absolutely right in what you're saying. I know you said it's your opinion, but I would agree with your opinion. It's not just about ticking the boxes of having all of the technical skills, because skills are something that can be learnt. They can
Yeah,
be learnt. Now, what you can't, or what you will find more difficult to teach, is attitude.
yeah,
And
that,
and and
that's it.
I was one of the guys in the very beginning of my career where I employed people who ticked the box. I was that guy, and I've learned from that ever since, because you're right, those people can tick the box. They've been out of their way, they've prepared, done really well, but they've been in 5 different jobs in 5 different years, and you're wondering why. But usually it's around that attitude and willingness to learn.
Yeah.
And I think people nowadays should be willing to hire for attitude, because skills can be taught.
Yeah,
And as long as
yeah, and
you're open and willing to learn, you'll be a great employee.
yeah,
And you're right
that,
about
that's
saying
it.
about the confidence you get from that preparation. Digging into that preparation and then being able to walk in confidently and say, I don't have that skill that you're looking for, but I am willing to learn. That's the attitude. That's the attitude.
That, yeah, there was a point in time where before the interview, well, it's not before the interview starts, the moment you pass through the door. And all. If someone thinks that it's only when the sheets are out and we'll start now with the question one, interview has started already. You're already late. But I used to, before starting the questions, sometimes and this was for nurse roles, I used to ask, what do you think that the nurse does?
Okay.
And you could do the same thing with the carer, for example. And I know I keep going back to the nurses and carers, but it's the
Yeah,
sector
that's
that I,
sure.
that I
Yeah,
work
yeah.
in. And I used to ask, what do you think that the carer does? This is in care homes. And it's people sometimes were also applying, not, and they will do good interviews, but they're not great employees, and they would resign sometimes after a couple of months because the idea that they had of the job role itself
Mm,
was different from the reality. I would have
okay.
sometimes people coming in for a care assistant role, and their idea of a care assistant is helping someone with food or helping them, read them a story, keep them company. And whenever I ask, well, about personal care, I said, oh, we're going to have to do personal care. Yes. Oh, I don't think I could. I think that you need to prepare yourself for what you are applying to. And that was before there was any other questions on on the
Yeah.
interview sheet.
That,
But
that, that's a great question. That's an absolutely brilliant question because it is really helping people look internally at their expectations of the role. And again, based on potentially the job description, they have something completely different in their head. And straight
yeah,
away, you're thinking about 3 months down the line, 4 months down the line, am I going to have to replace this person again because this is not the job they applied for?
yeah,
That is a wonderful question. And I
yeah,
think more companies should ask that question more often.
yeah, because it's important, and it's nothing. And I don't think uh, people don't do that out of I don't care. They just don't. They've never done it. Their notion of the role is different, and the job description does not. Job description does might not stipulate every single task that you have to do. Just okay, to a degree, it should entail or details something, but even for you that you might think that I would like to do this job. Actually, do you really know what that job is?
Hmm.
Perhaps there is another job for you in the care home, but is not a carer or a nurse.
Yeah.
Because there's many roles in many places that perhaps the role that you want is something different. There might be a space for that role and the role doesn't exist, but actually you might want to you might get the employer to think that actually I've had I've had roles created for applicants that didn't exist, but it made sense. I worked with a gentleman, and he was in charge of the housekeeping,
Hmm.
and he was very good with people. So I introduced. It was like an hospitality manager role for that gentleman, and his job was solving complaints. And it's pretty simple because he knew his things, but he was really good with people. And whenever there was a visitor, whenever there was a relative, whenever there was something with missing, or I don't know where, you know this is not my dad's shirt, why is it in this wardrobe? Those
Yeah.
things might seem trivial, but it's important. I don't want my relative to be using someone else's clothes.
Yeah.
And by the same token, where are my relatives clothes? And he would be just like that on the ball. you know Someone comes in and says, "Do you want some tea or coffee?" And I'll be honest, it was great. He was great at that job.
Yeah.
It stopped a lot of the issues
Yeah.
that would happen because he was addressing them. So it made sense to create a role for that person. And I think sometimes, but it took you to sit down with someone and might be an interview
Hmm.
and say that, is there something else that you would like to do here? Because I think you're better at this. Sometimes when you're talking about someone about the role itself at the start of the interview, and you have this open discussion of what you think that the job is about, because we expect you to do this, and this, and the person might say that actually no, that's not. I'm not applying. I can't do that, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some people might not be able to do personal care. That is absolutely fine. I thought it was uh, more about doing this type of thing with the patients, for example, or the residents. And that might trigger on the employer that actually, it might sense. So if I might do a different role, or they can go back and discuss that interview and think, actually, we could try a role like that. They get back to you and
Yeah.
say that, well, we're going to do, and we thought about what you said, and there's a different role. Would you like to come in and try, and we'll see how it goes?
And I suppose that that's all well and good as long as the employer has a very open mind, like you
Oh
have.
yeah, it takes that as well.
That takes a very different type of character or person to think the way you do, because in essence, most of the people that are on the interview panel don't really want to be doing it. I have been on panels for years and years, and it is easy to count on one hand how many people enjoy doing that role. So they're not actually thinking about the big picture of the whole company. They're thinking about, here's a position, we need to fill this position, we need the best person as quickly as possible so I can stop interviewing.
Yeah,
and that's it. And that's all they go in for. They go in to tick those boxes. And you know what? Sometimes that works, that gets the person that they need to fill the space that they need. But when you're working in quite a dynamic place like you would be working in, you're thinking about all of those different possibilities. And especially when you know the big picture, it makes a huge difference if you can take a step back and think, do you know what? He may not be good or she may not be good for this position we've advertised for, but maybe we need that person for a different position. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you very rarely found it difficult to fill places within your organization, because if you were able to create or identify skills within people within a half an hour or 45-minute interview, I would say that you were able to fill your spots right and quickly and maintain those people in those places for longer than normal.
Oh yes, I still think that if someone is happy in their job, it's someone that is staying. It just works for everyone. That's why it's all about, goes back to the start. It's all about the people, all the people involved. Whether it's you as you're applying for a job, you matter. The people that you're going to be looking for, they matter. The visitors that were asking about the father's shirt, they matter. So it always goes back to people. And yeah, I think that employers perhaps should be open to actually listen. But I think that it's important as an interviewee, as an applicant or a candidate, that you also try and put it across as in a position that I am willing to. I do want to work for your company.
Yeah.
You might say that this is not the role to find. Is there another role that perhaps I can be suited? And I know that very, very often, or most commonly, is sometimes, unfortunately, people not even get feedback.
Yes.
They're just waiting on a letter to come in, see if they were accepted or not, and there's just no letter, which is perceived as unsuccessful. And I do know that I'm not I'm not naive. You know how the world works. But I think that as an interviewee, you have the opportunity to try and open that door.
Yeah.
The interviewer might not be interested in doing it, but you know what? There's nothing that you can do about their attitude coming into the interview. But there is something you can do about your attitude going into the interview. And I think that it might be successful, it might not. Don't throw your, don't let yourself get down for if you don't succeed. But do try and come across, I think it's important, honest. Just be you, what you are willing to do, and this is what I know. I know that I don't have this from your desirable list, but I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to improve my skills to achieve those things. Some employers might think that that's great. I have someone here that is willing to, and they'll give you the chance. Others might not. But if you don't open that door to yourself, it's harder for you to then get in.
Yeah. And I love that. I love that. And I suppose that leads us lovely on to a, a, a piece of advice that you might give to someone about going into interviews. And I know you've said there about that attitude, but one
Yeah.
significant piece of advice, if you were to be able to speak to your younger self and say,
Mhm.
Tiago, and make sure you do this one thing, what would that one thing be?
Prepare. That's the single most thing. The better prepared you are, the more confident your attitude is going to be, the more confident your answers are going to be, and the more confident the interviewer is going to, think that, what, this person, they know what they're talking about. They know the things they actually know, because that's another thing that used to, sometimes people would ask on the questions, what do you know about the company? And you don't see that anymore on interview templates. But it is important, and I think that the better prepared you are. See, the interview that I did in English,
Mhm.
I was lucky and I got the job, but I was thrown because those care plans questions, and I had the experience and the knowledge, and I was able to answer it. It was lucky because I could not have had that experience. But if I had, and I didn't, obviously I read about the company itself, but I didn't read exactly how things work
Hmm.
in the company. But how our care, I was applying for to work in a care home in a different country. I researched the company, which is fine, but I didn't actually research what or how does a care home work
Yeah.
in that country. It didn't even click that it might be different
Yeah.
from Portugal. Because if I had prepared, I wouldn't have hesitated on those answers. I know exactly what it is they're looking for. So I think that prepare, try and find as much information as possible. Get yourself ready as much as possible. And the more prepared you are, the better likelihood of a positive outcome is for you. I think that's important.
Oh, thanks, Tiago. That's completely in agreement with that. It is about that preparation, setting yourself up for success,
Yeah.
as opposed to just hoping that luck and Madam Luck is in your favor for that day.
Yeah.
I'm not a believer in luck. I'm a believer in preparation. I'm a believer in creating opportunities. And that has worked for me. And it sounds like that's worked for you because it's about that
Yeah.
preparation, getting yourself set up and just going for it when you're in there with the right attitude. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. You may not have all of what they desire on that job description, but if you are eager and willing to learn, you're twice as good as probably the next candidate that's
Yeah.
coming through that door, and they will remember you for that reason
Yeah, of course.
because you're
Yeah.
teachable.
Yeah, and I mean, many times, that well, there's been occasions where you've offered someone else a job. You offer person a job and not person B. You know what? Things didn't turn out. 3 months in, things didn't turn out. And you say, well, actually, you know what? See person B, we
Mm.
weren't sure between one of the two, but it didn't work out with A. Instead of going through everything and everyone again, let's give a ring to person B, see if they are still on the market, still looking for something. Because I think better impression you make, if anything else, Kevin, I think it prepares you for the next interview.
Yeah, yeah,
You
that's
know,
it, isn't it? Leave
didn't
that
get
lasting
this one.
impression. Yeah,
Yeah,
leave that lasting impression. Learn something from this, and move forward. And I think if you even consider why we have created this podcast, it is about learning from those worst interviews ever and what you then take into the future. It's about putting all of those best practices in place. And this isn't just, I suppose, for that interview process. This is a life skill, being able to learn from other people's mistakes, your own mistakes, and
yeah,
trying to create that path to success by reducing those mistakes every time. And the only way
yeah,
you're going to do that is by doing the thing that potentially will have the opportunity to make that mistake. You have to do it. You can't think about doing it. You can't research all about it. You have to go and you have to do it. And you will learn the more and more you do it. Tiago, I think me and you could talk here forever about this because you and I are very similar in our thought processes around
I
this sort of
think so.
recruitment. And I think we've had sort of similar experiences with recruiting as well. But
Yeah,
we're going to have to bring today to a close. I have
not a problem.
absolutely thrilled to have you on today because it's great to find somebody else with a passion for doing things appropriately
Yeah,
and correctly. And I really appreciate the courage to share those what at the time may not have been humorous stories, but they are a little more humorous now
yeah.
after the
There
fact
was.
when we look back. But I really appreciate that. I'm sure my listeners have taken a lot from that. And
Yeah, I
I
mean,
hope you all the very best within
thank you very
your
much.
organization. And the organization is We Care, isn't that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And
And where can
I
where can
like
people find out more about that?
on our website. So if they go to our website, which is www.wecareni.com, there's all information there in terms of what we do, where you can find us. There's contact forms there that just to come straight to us about the benefits for working for us, what we are willing to give to you. There's a little bit of info there as well about myself and my wife. And I think that is the best starting point. And if you go through the content of the site, and if you're thinking that this is interesting, then I'm here, and we'll be more. At least we'll talk, we'll meet. It might not be what you're looking for. It might, but if you don't ring, you'll
That's
never
it.
know.
Well, Tiago, let me tell you, if I was in your particular industry, I would really like to have you as a boss because you are one of those people who think differently than most. And I don't mean that in a negative manner. I mean that in a really positive way because you think very differently and you are so resilient to just continue to push and push and push. So thank you very, very much for coming on today.
No,
Okay.
it was a pleasure.
Yeah, as it was for me. Okay, everybody, thank you very much for tuning in today. Please have a look at our notes, and if you want more details about We Care, they will all be in the show notes. Speak to you again very soon when we have our next guest on. Who do you think it should be? Bye now.
Bye.
For more details about our guest, or if you would like to be a guest, go to www.interviewskillscoach.co.uk/my-worst-interview-ever, or find us on Facebook or LinkedIn. And remember, on the other side of a successful interview is the life you deserve.